This will make you feel happy on a Thursday morning. Sluggish economic growth and high national debt is going to leave the country facing its biggest economic crisis since the 1950s, regardless of who is going to win the next election. That's according to a new report by the Institute for Fiscal Studies. They're also warning that even if there are tax cuts promised, they're going to have to be rowed back on over the next few years because there simply won't be enough money in the coffers. Well, former government chief economist and now the UK Treasury official, former UK Treasury official as well, Jonathan Portes, joins me now. Good morning to you, Jonathan.
Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Institute for Fiscal Studies, highly respected in terms of their forecast. They're basically saying, look, we are up a certain creek and we don't have a panel, and it doesn't really matter who's going to win the next election and what promises they make. The fiscal outlook is bad.
That's right. Whichever party wins the next election will face some difficult choices. I don't think it's quite as bad as you say. I mean, what the IFS is saying is that that you have to be honest about the trade-offs facing the country, and in particular that the pressure on public services is very great, that some public services are clearly deteriorating quite radically, and that announcing tax cuts now would mean either things getting considerably worse or simply means that taxes will have to go up again after the election. And therefore, and they say this quite explicitly, which is quite unusual for the IFS because they're usually quite sort of deliberately tactful. They say, that the government shouldn't be willfully ignoring reality, and that tempting as it might be to engage in cakeism, any party serious about governing after the election should resist the urge. In other words, tax cuts now would be ignoring reality, and I think that's the message they're trying to get across. That's the key thing.
But again, there was this survey, a poll carried out by this sort of Conservative alliance who basically want Rihsi Sunak to go, and they found that basically in terms of support for Rihsi Sunak or support for some mythical leader who would cut taxes and spend more on public services, etc., that they would vote for that person. Well, yeah, wouldn't we all? But again, those aren't the choices, are they? Because there isn't any money, and even if Labour get in, and they're being quite careful about how much they are promising that they are going to spend. You can't be spending a load more money without putting taxes up, and you can't be borrowing anymore because we were already sort of at the peak of that, and we saw what happened to interest rates when Liz Truss did that.
Well, that's right. I mean, I think it's not. Again, I would say it's not quite as bad as that. I mean, Liz Truss deliberately trashed the government's borrowing capacity.
She didn't deliberately do that.
Sensible
That's
government, a sensible government could probably borrow more. And remember, the IFS forecast are just that, their forecast, and the IFS would tell you there's lots of uncertainty there. Things could be better or they could be worse. So this is not written. And they also say quite rightly that if growth improves, then there will be considerably more flexibility.
Well,
so
let me talk about growth, because this is one of the biggest issues, isn't it? Is that everyone says we're pro-growth, but we don't see growth. We just don't see growth. And we haven't had it for years, and there's no prospect of it going much higher in coming years. Growth would be the solution to all of our problems. Why don't we?
Well, mostly, a lot of it is about politics. And I think economists like me would say, well, actually, we do know a lot of the things that we need to generate growth. It's just that some of them are very difficult politically. Most obviously, for example, improving the planning system, allowing us to build more houses, allowing us to build more infrastructure more quickly and cheaply. Those would help growth. They are very difficult politically, of course.
Yeah, because the people who object to planning are always people who own their own homes, more likely to vote, et cetera, et cetera. But again, I'm in favour of the mantra, build more houses. Look, the outlook is pretty difficult, and that's probably why we are seeing quite a lot of wariness on both sides about what they're actually going to promise. But we have got a budget coming up on March the 6th. We're told we're going to see tax cuts. Do you think we will? Do you think there'll be meaningful tax cuts, given that actually we've seen a huge number, as Labour point out, of tax rises, a lot of that with the thresholds being frozen, so actually more and more people getting dragged into higher rates of tax without an official announcement on you're paying more tax. Do you think that we will actually see tax cuts that actually do put money back into people's pockets?
Well, I certainly hope not, for the reasons the IFS set out. That is to say, It would be willfully ignoring reality. There are useful things the government could do in terms of tax reform, changing some of the really stupid aspects of our tax system that result in very high marginal tax rates for people at very specific points of the income distribution, people with children on moderately high incomes, people in the 100, 120,000 income. So you could reform taxes in a way which would help. But big, large-scale tax cuts are just going to have to reverse one way or another after the election. So, what's the point? It's just not a sensible way of treating the public.
Indeed. Jonathan Portes, thank you very much, former government chief economist.